Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a wonderful episode of the Duck Zone. This is our college football playoff reaction show. The bracket is out, and the games or the regular season games are done. Conference championship weekend was very exciting. So we're going to talk about some of the championship games first, and then we're going to talk about the bracket and kind of overall our reactions here on today's podcast. James, I'm going to jump it over to you. I know we had 6 games that we highlighted last week going into championship weekend. What were your reaction to these 6 games?
Yeah, so we'll start out with Friday. Both the Mountain West and the American Athletic were at the same time. So rather than tune into both, which you can do on YouTube TV with split screen, I just watched the Boise State game. I will give it hats off to Army. They won their game 35-14, won the American Athletic Championship Conference. So good for them. Unfortunately, that led them nowhere. So
Yep.
um, but yeah, going into Boise State, I thought that was a really fun game
Yep.
to watch. I mean, we've talked about Ashton Genty all year. The guy ran for 209 yards and a touchdown, and they pretty much handled that game from start to finish. I mean, they jumped out super early. They were up 21-0 by halftime, and I don't think UNLV scored until the fourth quarter, if I remember right.
Yep.
But their defense looked pretty solid. So nothing. I mean, nothing crazy out of that game. I mean, I think a lot of people, assumed Boise State would win, which they did, and we'll react to the bracket later. I don't want to, get to that quite yet, but it obviously, winning that game helped them a lot. And then Saturday, uh, yeah, Saturday was a pretty fun day of college football for the big. I'll call it the Big Four, being the Big 12, ACC, SEC, and Big 10. ASU, that was an incredible performance. I mean, I did not see that coming. I know that we both picked ASU to win, but I did not know that it would just be an absolute slaughter fest. And again, another, kudos, hats off to Kenny Dillingham. Uh, I think he won 2, maybe 3 games his first year. Was picked to finish last in the Big 12 this year, dead last, and has this team in a bye for the college football playoffs. So that's insane. That's it pains me, as you can see with the hat I'm wearing. It pains me to say it, but congrats to ASU. That's phenomenal. Moving on to the SEC game, that was also a really fun game. Georgia pulled it out in the end in overtime. Um, I didn't watch that game too closely. Actually, the rest of the 3 games I didn't watch too closely. I kind of tuned in when I could. I had other stuff going on, but Georgia hung on and beat Texas 22-19 in overtime. And then we saw Oregon pull out a pretty good win against Penn State. And I say pretty good win because I wasn't really that impressed with Oregon's defense every time I tuned in. I mean, as the score showed, it was 45-37 Oregon. I really thought Oregon's defense was going to be the key to that game. It ended up being their offense, which, talking about in last week's podcast, you had mentioned their defense being the key to their season, which it has been all year. And we saw a shootout, which was interesting. And then the final game, I guess, not final game because they were airing simultaneously, but we saw SMU make a pretty heroic comeback to tie the game. And then Clemson Clemson walked it off with a 56-yard field goal. And that was really the only way Clemson was going to make it in. So they got the automatic bid with
Yeah.
that. So yeah, all in all, I thought it was a pretty fun championship weekend. And, if this is going to be the new norm for college football with this 12-game playoff, I'm impressed. So I'll kick it back to you and we can tear apart the bracket.
Yeah, right before I do that, just wanted to add a couple of things. I thought Genty was really good. It's going to be interesting this upcoming weekend. We'll get the Heisman. I wonder if it was enough to push him over the top. He's definitely one or two. I know Travis Hunter is the very much favorite, but it will be interesting to see how he breaks down in the votes, and if he's able to steal some of those votes because he had an incredible season, and he's going to be a
He
very high.
deserves it. He
Yeah.
deserves it.
Yeah,
If I can chime in real quick, I don't think Travis Hunter should win this award. I mean, his team didn't go to the play or the postseason. I know Travis Hunter had a really good season, but there are other wide receivers on that Colorado team, and Shador takes a lot of the headlines. Normally, I know Travis Hunter this year was kind of the headline guy, and I get it. He plays on both sides of the ball. He's a really good cornerback, and he's a really good receiver. But Genti was doing things we haven't seen out of a running back.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I don't have the stats or the quotes or the stuff up to look at, but I mean, I remember it being like historic stuff, and he got his team a bye. I mean, I don't know what else you need to do.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see because for years now, for nearly 2 decades, Boise State has been hunting down, getting a big game, everything like that. It's amazing now to see them in that 3 spot. They're the hunt hid, which is weird. They're going to be, the represented home team in their first game. And a shot at actually being in a national championship. It's crazy to say that about Boise State. Moving forward, ASU, as you said, that performance was incredible. I think they're one of the hottest teams in football right now. I wouldn't want to play them. I know a lot of people have been saying there's a flaw in the system. I do believe that, too. Being the 5 seed gives you an advantage. But I'm going to tell you right now, say Texas beats Clemson, which I think they will. Them having to go play ASU, that's no gimme right now. ASU is a very, very tough team to play, and I wouldn't want to play them. Texas got lucky in the aspect of that's going to be played in the Peach Bowl, or whoever plays them, is going to be in the Peach Bowl and is not going to be in Arizona. I thought Texas Georgia was kind of a snooze fest. I think 2 teams really struggling. I get there. Georgia got the 2 spot, that makes sense. Texas getting the first spot as a 5, they just didn't look very good to me. They got to really start getting clicking because they just didn't look very good in that game. Oregon, you kind of already mentioned it. Defense was shaky. Offense looked fantastic. Penn State's gonna do things though, and I think this postseason though they looked pretty good, and that represented the Big Ten well. And I'm happy SMU got in, but we're gonna bridge right on into that. I didn't watch the SMU Clemson game as closely as the others because I was watching very closely to Oregon. But let's talk about the bracket. And were there any surprises to you? Anything that stood out, or was it pretty much what you were expecting?
I wouldn't say surprises. I mean, obviously they, in typical ESPN fashion, whether it's any kind of selection show, March Madness, I mean, they draw it out and try to do all they can to make it as long as possible. But obviously 11 of the 12 teams, you could say, were pretty much set in stone, and they were really trying to beef up that SMU or Alabama, who was going to get that last slot. I personally thought, I'm not saying this is who I think deserved. I think SMU deserved it. If you had to ask me, I would have picked SMU. I thought it was going to go to Alabama for revenue, for TV ratings. So I'm kind of happy that, you can make a case for either one. I get it. I can see both sides. I can see Alabama. However, that loss to Oklahoma that really hurt them. And then I can see why people were like, but I don't know if I want SMU because who have they beaten and who do they play? Okay, great. I get that too. But I'm happy they went with SMU because they did make it to their conference championship game. I know they lost, but it was literally a walk-off. It almost went to overtime. So, yeah, I mean, I think the committee got it about as right as they could. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who do you have, SMU or Alabama?
I was pretty good with it. It was kind of a toss-up either way. In my opinion, watching college football very closely here over the last couple months, Alabama lost the spot when they played Oklahoma. They just looked awful in that game. And had they won the game against Oklahoma, I think Alabama automatically gets in, and we have no discussion, and SMU would have been left out at that point. That Oklahoma loss was really bad. The only thing that kind of surprised me, and it's a very minor tweak, is I thought that Clemson would actually end up being ranked ahead of SMU, having SMU be in the 12 and Clemson in the 11, having them just beat them. But that's such a minor tweak that overall Not a really big thing. Everything else kind of makes sense to me off of what happened in championship weekend, so I actually had no problems with it. So, um, which this bridges me to a question for you. Now that we have a 12-team playoff, one thing I found very surprising after it was revealed was the dead silence of every other bowl game. Is the bowl game thing just kind of done now?
It seems that way. They didn't talk about anything else. I don't even think they had a bowl game reveal show, which they used to have prior to this year. Yeah, I haven't even seen like normally they have like bowl season commercials, but really all they're promoting is this college football playoff championship. So
Yeah, I agree.
unless you're a fan of Jacksonville State and you want to go watch them play, or you want to like, I don't think it really matters to the general public.
Yeah, but I think it's gonna be really exciting to see this tournament play out, and I think they got the right 12. I think it's gonna bring a lot of. It's gonna be really exciting. I think it's gonna be really popping in these first round games in these home environments. I think it's gonna be really cool that just kind of how it played out. You're going to have a Tennessee having to go to Columbus, play Ohio State, potentially in the snow. You get the in-state rivalry, or what they want to be a rivalry of Notre Dame and University of Indiana going up against each other. You're going to get really cool matchups that you never really see, and when you do see them, they're usually in those pristine conditions, like those first few weeks of the season. Now we're going to start seeing them in brutal weather. There's a good chance that Penn State game is just going to be, eh, who knows? It's going to be a literal whiteout.
Well, and here's a fun Penn State fact for you. I can't stand Penn State. I don't think they're good. I think they're overrated. I know they won all the games they could win, minus the
Yep.
Ohio State game, and then obviously they lost to Oregon in their championship game. But James Franklin is 1-14 versus top five opponents, 3-19 versus top 10 opponents, 13-28 versus top 25 opponents, and 4-17 versus Michigan and Ohio State. The guy cannot win big games. So if there is, initially looking when SMU has to travel to Penn State, Penn State will have the home advantage. SMU's coming from Dallas.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania's much colder, much harsher environment.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't sleep on SMU upsetting them because Penn State just can't seem to win the big games.
Yeah. I agree. We'll do our picks next week, but just asking you first reaction to the bracket. Is there a team that you think has a slightly easier path, or a good road to the title game?
Yeah, I think definitely Notre Dame hosting Indiana.
Yep.
I think Notre Dame has a pretty. I don't want to say easy. It's not going to be easy, but easier path. So say they beat Indiana, then they play Georgia in the
Yep.
Sugar Bowl. Georgia doesn't seem like the Georgia of old. I mean, they're
Yep.
beatable. And
Yep.
then after that, then they would play the winner of Boise State and whoever they play, SMU or Penn State. So Notre
Yep.
Dame looks like they have a pretty solid shot. Honestly, anyone in that bottom tier,
Yeah.
and when I say bottom tier, it's the Georgia and Boise State. I mean, I think that seems a lot easier than the upper half, which has Oregon, Ohio State,
Yep.
ASU, Tennessee, Texas. I know Texas didn't look good, but overall, I think they're still a pretty good team. But those are some juggernauts. I mean, you have two non-power four teams in SMU. Or no, that's not true. I guess
Yep.
Boise State's the only non
Yeah. It's just like
non-power
a
five. I forgot
non-traditional
yeah,
powerhouse.
SMU's in the ACC.
Yeah.
Right. But SMU's not. Yes, they're not a traditional powerhouse. Boise State, they've been slaying giants. I feel like for a long time. I remember
Yep.
being at that Boise State Oklahoma game when they
Yep.
did the hook and ladder and the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
But they just have never been given an opportunity to win a national championship, and that's cool that they now have one. But
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Initial reactions. I'm going to say Notre Dame. I think they have the easiest path per se. How about you?
Yeah, Notre Dame was the one that jumped out to me as well. I think they beat Indiana at home. I agree with you with Georgia. The other one that kind of jumps out, just from the aspect of, I think they played really well in the Big Ten championship, was Penn State. I think Penn State beats SMU because it's at home. I think they beat Boise State just from the aspect of they have big receivers, and that was one of the things that Oregon really struggled with um, on Saturday night is guarding their tight ends. And I don't know how Boise State's going to match up with their secondary. They might be able to throw all over them. I think Penn State's going to struggle with Genty, though. And then it's just going to be interesting from there. But I agree with you. I think the top is a lot harder than the bottom. Um, but yeah, we'll go through all our picks next week. James, any other thoughts before we sign off here? A little short episode.
No, not really. Like you said, we're going to dive deep into more of these matchups one by one starting next week. But I am curious to see what happens with the Carson Beck injury.
Yep.
I know Georgia fans actually thought they were playing better. I was swiping Twitter, and a lot of people were like, "Wow, Georgia's offense is getting unlocked with his backup Gunner, whatever his name was."
Yeah.
As opposed to Carson Beck.
Yeah.
But
It was
honestly,
weird. Yeah.
they it was weird. But you didn't have a game plan for a non Carson Beck quarterback, so you know.
But
God,
as we
why can I
talked,
not think of that guy's name? We'll just call him
yeah,
Gunner. But anyways,
yeah,
obviously, if he gets named the starter, I think that absolutely plummets Georgia's opportunity because whoever they have to play, whether that's Indiana or Notre Dame, having to
yeah,
go up against a backup quarterback for Georgia is going to be much easier than I know Carson Beck hasn't had a great year, but I I personally would much rather have Carson Beck than Gunner or whatever his name is. So
yeah.
that's
Well,
kind of just my big takeaway to kind of monitor what's going to happen with him.
yeah.
But he's
Well,
got time. He's got plenty of time to heal up.
it'll be yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the next week. And as I said, we'll be revealing our picks next Monday. So, guys, tune in. We also have our NFO show coming out for this upcoming week um, in a couple days. So, guys, stay close. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see y'all later.